in the preparation to the events in Brussels. So at first I'll pass the floor to Senyuk, and then my name is Solesa Senyuk. I'm the head of the analytical department. Olesa Senyuk. I'm the head of the analytical direction at the Human Rights Protection Center in Smina. I had an honor to represent this statement on the part of the civil society organizations. We have over 40 signatories. These are the leading organizations dealing with the return, rehabilitation, seeking justice for the Ukrainian children whose rights are being violated in the context of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Our statement was particularly based on the fact that on the fourth year of the full-scale invasion and 12th year of the war of Russia against Ukraine, well, the civil society organizations have already accumulated certain experience in terms of how do we work with some of the tasks pertaining to violation of the rights of the children. Plus, the challenges are changing in terms of how Russian Federation is creating new obstacles for the process of return. So the statement is based on this context, and it mentions some of the calls to the member states of the coalition for the return of Ukrainian children. It's all about steps in different dimensions and the pressure on stopping the violations and returning Ukrainian children. It's all about ensuring the accountability and supporting the ICC on fulfillment of the arrest warrants that was issued against the president of the Russian Federation and his commissioner for children's rights, as well as the fulfillment of recommendations of the US, UN agencies, and the OSCE within, more specifically the Moscow mechanism, and the proper establishment of rehabilitation and the stable systems, making sure that the children are sent to family foster houses, and making sure that we would be prioritizing this experience and supporting the initiatives proved to be effective and productive and localization of those efforts. Besides, we're calling upon the coalition to have a certain action plan for the return of the Ukrainian children and the mechanism for the verification of its fulfillment. We hope that since our statement have been provided to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, hopefully that statement would be introduced at the summit of the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children that will take place on the 11th of May. And hopefully it will set the next steps and not just formal support. Thank you. We thank you, Onesa, and let me pass the floor to Mykola Kuleba, who's the founder and CEO of Ukraine. Thank you, Maxim. And I fully support the words of my colleague with regards to the statement to the coalition. And we have an experience of returning over 1,300 children, including 250. Those are the orphans. And we do need the efforts of the coalition because it's been over 4 years since the beginning of the full-scale invasion and 12 years since the occupation of the territories of Donetsk, Luhansk regions, and Crimea. And as was already mentioned, 1.6 million Ukrainian children are trapped in Russian occupation. And just recently, I talked to a boy from Luhansk, and we managed to rescue him. And I had a question to him. Look, you're already 18 years old. When the occupation started in Luhansk, you were only 6 years old. Like, how did you manage to preserve the Ukrainian identity? He says, I'm a Ukrainian. Okay, but what did you know about your Ukrainian identity at the age of 6? And he replied to me, I was always interested in learning more information, so I was using the VPN and searching information on the internet. But not every child has a chance to do so. But having you been brainwashed at school, yes. But I wasn't, much in for believing those. Man, maybe Russian military talked to you. Maybe they were offering you to serve in the Russian army. He said yes, but I didn't want to be, to fight against my own country. These are, unique situations when a child at the age of 6 at the start of the occupation did not turn into a Russian child, was not, trained to have a hatred against our own people, as we can see with other children. That is why we need so that the member nations of the coalition would combine those efforts, allowing us to reach our children, to provide the children with clear information about Ukraine, about other countries, to create possibilities in other countries that could be used for the rehabilitation of our children. Because many children are at a situation that they're not willing to die for Russia, but they know nothing about Ukraine because they spent 12 years in occupation. They were not brought up as the Ukrainian children. They were forced to have the identity of the aggressor country, and there's more and more children like that. That is why we need the involvement of the coalition, so that they would help us to reach our children, help us to return those children. Currently, in the Save Ukraine Children, we have the programs of hope and recovery, and there's over 800 beds in our program. There's 130 buildings around Ukraine, and every day we are providing support to the rescued children and rescued families. And we are overwhelmed because there's more and more situation when we need a long-term rehabilitation, not a day or two, but years or couple of years, when the children survive the death of their relatives or murder of their friends or next of kin. We don't know how much time the child would need in order to recover, in order to start live his or her own life. I'm not going to mention many of the stories, but I just say that we will need the support of the coalition, a joint, a combined effort, so that we would be able to rescue all those other children who need so and to recover their childhood. Thank you, Mykola. Let me pass the floor to Daria Kosanova from the Ukraine Network for Children's Rights. Thank you, Maxim. Well, the main thing has already been told today. It's important that we heard young adults, so to say, those children who had an experience of deportation, who lived under conditions of the occupation. But the statement that we have given on behalf of the civil support organizations, 28 members of the organizations have supported this statement. These are the organizations that are directly working with children, with families. We believe that all the children affected by the war are vulnerable. And today, take an example, the development of a service on reintegration, we are using that to build the system of supporting the families and children. This is a unique experience for us, an important one, because not all the children live in Kiev. They live in many other places. So together with our partners, we're searching for the possibility not only to reintegrate those children, but bring them back to life. We develop a system of support, but all of that will be transferred to the state. And after some time, it will become a real services at a level of community, where those children will live, where those families will live. And we know that in the course of the years, we shall continue to return children from Russia, from occupied territories, and helping them to adapt in Ukraine. So this statement, it's very important for us, and the processes of localization are the key and important one. And we've developed a unique experience that we might not want to have, but still, those organizations that are working in Ukraine, they have proven its effectiveness. They know and understand how certain mechanisms can work or not work. And in our statement, we've also underlined an important clause, the safety of the volunteers and those civil organizations who are physically returning our children, who are accompanying our children in those territories that remain unreachable for international humanitarian organizations. That is why we believe that this statement is an important one to be heard, and our point to be taken into account on the 11th of May in Brussels. Thank you, Daria. Let me pass the floor to the organization Voices of Children. Thank you. Let me compliment my colleagues and share the statements that I've already heard, we're the organization that is specializing on the psychological support and assistance to the children. We, we are the organization. We support psychologically the children with different experiences of war, of deportation, and staying in occupation. Now, what's what do we what do we add? The importance of psychological health of the children here and now, and the thing that we should not be waiting until the end of the war, or we will have more money, or we have more favorable conditions. Well, that's a false, well, decision and point. There's many researches and observations of different conflicts, and all of them point to the fact that if the child is without the help, if we'll not develop the system of mental health at all levels, not only in the office of the psychotherapist, but also in the communities and in school, well, in that case, it may result in traumas being passed from generation to generation, but also results in the false perception of a natural resilience of a child, as if the psychic condition of a child is flexible. It is flexible, but you know, you might think that if the child is taken to school, if the child has, a place to live, then everything is fine. What else would you need? Would you need to find those, like multiple sessions with the psychologist? Well, all of the researchers, they prove that the lack of such a support and funding the psychological support at the kind of as the least priority, it all results in the fact that the children live on with PTSD, with stress, and this is something that they take from their childhood into adult life, and the environment is not becoming, well, a healthy one. It's not going to be able to kind of to naturally go. The propaganda that you were receiving, in doses and so bright in school, it's not going to vanish. It's not going to disappear. You would need a system, uh, like a dimension with different psychologists, psychiatrists, rehabilitologists, case managers, and the facilities that can be hosting the children and the services available at all levels in order to compensate, in order to help to live, because the larger is the dose, the larger is the trauma in occupation, the more work you would need to do. The longer the child was under indoctrination in occupation, then the longer would be the work um, that we would need to accomplish after its return. Why is that important? To be supported by the coalition in the country, Ukraine won't be able to, well, cope with those challenges. We won't be able to, immediately come up with many thousands of psychiatrists because, it requires funding, it requires expertise, and, well, we have an expertise, and we've developed that in cooperation with many other states. There's understanding, there's the coordination, but this is definitely something that we need, that requires further attention and funding. Now, the largest mistake that may be happening uh, would be made if we would consider these, the idea of helping the children, helping families is the least uh, prioritized. Like we rescued them, we gave them support, and that's it. No, the lives of the children and families turn upside down in a single moment. Now, all those shattered pieces of their life now have to be recollected, and we want to have this experience. We want to reinforce our expertise and to create such conditions in Ukraine under which the children would be not just to forget the experience they had, but at least to live, to continue living as a free Europeans. Thank you. We thank dear colleagues, and now we can have a Q&A session if we have any questions. So, dear journalists, do you have any questions? Oh, everyone's freezing. Okay. In this case, if we don't have any questions and everyone are fully saturated with the overwhelming amount of information, I would suggest that we would finish the press conference, and I thank you all for your attention.